Well, good evening, Galleon. This is Tom O'Leary back Monday night live stream, talking about the city of Galleon, things that are going on this week, and as usual, we'll answer some questions about topics in the past, the recent past, maybe a few things about going forward into next year. Starting there, today was part of a small presentation that involved the city's uh, the engineer for the city, and that is Josh Schlega, Gary Frankhouse, the partnership. The three of us made a presentation to a group called Jobson Commerce. It's part of ODOT, and they have a relatively small pool of funds to distribute among entities, 52 of them in the state, that are transportation improvement districts. Candidly, I wasn't a big fan of TIDs a couple years ago when there was a push to form them. I didn't really understand the kinds of projects that we could apply for funding. So the project that we discussed with state officials today was the widening of Brant Road to be the northbound, be a northbound turn lane at Brant Road as you're heading east at 598. So the purpose of that is to improve access, particularly allow for truck lane turnouts, turn-ins at the new industrial park facility that will be built once the remains of the old power equipment building are cleared and the site's ready for new construction next year. So, a lot of times what happens with highway, and I think we can see this a lot, that highway entities, local, state, county officials respond to growth after it's happened. And what we're trying to do with this project is anticipate the kind of growth that's going to happen when a new industrial facility is constructed at that corner, and try to improve access to 598. Two more pieces of this little TID project. As it connects to the overall widening of 598, I tend to call the big project. One of the improvements that will be in that project is that the current owner of that property has agreed to give up, if you will, the most northerly access onto the Pico property. So you have to look in your mind's eye or go out there the next time, and that's that main entrance that's very close to the intersection. And as long as you can keep that kind of traffic, those higher volumes of traffic, from entering and exiting off right by the main intersection, there's improved access management. I think that's another small but important part of that project. So while we're traditionally in Galleon used to getting into that property by turning off a 598, when this project's completed, that entrance exit will be gone, and the new entrance to the new industrial facility will be off of Brant Road. Therefore, another check mark on the need to try to get ahead of the development, get ahead of the growth in commercial and personal vehicles out there. So relatively small request. The last thing that we try to emphasize to the people that'll make the decision on quite a number of projects, from what we can tell, is that ours is ready to go. I could get up, walk, and bring back in a set of plans. The non-TID share is secured likely in the 2022 budget, and so this project's ready to go and ready to sell, ready to construct. And what I think in terms of the motorists, what they would expect, particularly if we get the money awarded, they can count on, is that project being completed at the end of, but perhaps in conjunction with, the overall widening of 598, again from roughly Arby's out to Route 30, or just north of the Brant Road 598 intersection. So, I don't know, it took up about an hour of a day. Quite a bit of prep went into that, and I thought we made a presentation that included a PowerPoint that that Matt in our office, working with Gary Frankhouse's communications person, Sarah, I believe her name is. We'll see how it goes. Nice presentation, tough competition. We hope that our readiness to sell and our relatively low request will help us fit in and allow them to award one more project without having to carve off a lot of their available funding. So that's, we'll certainly keep you informed, and I think there's a relatively quick 30, 60-day turnaround, so we'll know in the next couple of months whether we can count on funding going forward. Next thing I want to just mention real quickly is tomorrow's port meeting. That is, there are a number of contracts that they're going to look at, and I think it's 1/2 of what's needed to be able to get some money to the developer so that we can get some of the apartment projects that have been on hold and also begin to move ground out on the old Wrenchville property. So they're public meetings, generally not attended by very many members of the public, but there are 2 or 3 important items that they have on their agenda. Now, the ask on the other side was made a month ago when port members came and spoke to the finance committee about whether or not it made sense for the port to go ahead and pursue this next couple of steps, which they have. I was, participated in the meeting. I think generally speaking, the council committee members encouraged them to go ahead and work out some of the details. So that will happen at their meeting. It's that legislation and that discussion on the city side is not on the agenda tomorrow. I expect that to be discussed at finance on the following Wednesday. So port meeting as usual, a lot going on there, a lot of activity. This month in particular, I think what you'll see the forward movement on is getting some things going in the general need, the overall need to get housing started, get some new housing, meet that demand for housing that we know is out there. Couple more things real quick, and we'll see if we have some questions. The last Thursday, the utility committee met, and during that meeting, one of the primary discussions was about use of the American Rescue Plan dollars. A couple of updates. One is that the amount of money that the cities generally around the state, those under 50,000, the amount that they'd hoped to receive was reduced fairly significantly by including the townships throughout the state in those smaller jurisdictions. So we lost from what we thought was going to be 1.8 million in 2 basically allocations, 2 checks from the feds. It turns out that it's going to be more like 1.2 million, and so we're losing about 300,000 in each one of those rounds, if you will. Not excited about that. My opinion is there's not a whole lot we can do about it. But that's the first thing about the recovery dollars. It's going to be less to work with than we thought. And so I think the other, and because of that, in large part because of that, I think our focus has to stay on replacing existing infrastructure in our water and sewer systems. The hope at one point, when there was more money to be allocated, more money than there for to match with other federal funds, there's some discussion about extending water and sewer into parts of the greater Galion area, and I really believe that with the reduction in funds, our focus is going to shift more to doing things to improve the internal infrastructure on that water and sewer side of things in the city utilities. So that's a little more specific, and then therefore you get into discussion about how much money we want to set aside for the elimination of private common laterals. The discussion gosh, over the last 3 weeks or so has been about that on the sewer side, that people over time had gotten their sewer through common private tiles, and I've got a little packet of information that has identified many of those neighborhoods where we either know or suspect there are these common tiles. As we started to look at it a little more closely, the water side is not plagued, I think that's the wrong word, but has a number of these common public laterals on the water side. So that's another cost factor, another thing for us to decide up here at City Hall with council and the administration as to whether how much and in what ways we want to allocate funds to replace those private sewers. I'm really in favor of identifying them systematically, and then as they fail, make sure that we have money in the budget in future years to take care of those. I think it won't be an even setup where we have 6 or 7 every year. I think we'll have some emergencies, and then we'll have some scheduled ones. And so that number of private laterals that are replaced in any particular year may vary, 3, 4, 5 on a base of, let's say, 10 to 15 over the next few years. So I'm in favor of doing that. I think over the next 3 or 4 years, we have these federal dollars to allocate to the effort, and so I'm going to be continuing to recommend that to council. The other half of the meeting was a discussion about one of the uses on the water side to look at a systematic replacement of water meters. That discussion led into a conversation about how much water is made every day at Railroad Street, and then how much is billed. Gosh, it seems to me over the weekend, in an increasingly coordinated way, I might say, there are records requests for certain documents on Friday, and then that same information generally, although they haven't received the records request yet, it comes in at 4 o'clock or 3:30 on Friday, then that topic appears as a thread and talk about galleons. So when you see Brenda Akers spinning up questions about all this lost revenue in the water, it really is in conjunction with a request from Mrs. Wade for some initial data that was collected. I think it's described in the request as a rate study, but it's really an initial estimate of how much water is lost that was done a very preliminary way by Sawville back in 2014. So anyways, back to the thread. There's an assertion that there's revenue to be lost. This water is treated, and then we don't collect for it. I want to point out, although we haven't in just one day tracked down all of the elements of that unbilled, there's a lot of city use, which is some of it metered, some of it's not metered, but neither category is billed. I think the two biggest examples, the biggest ones to understand, are the swimming pool and the splash park. We don't charge ourselves, we're charged the YMCA for the use of that water. I wouldn't intend to. I'd say as long as I'm mayor, we're not going to do that. I think it's sort of a foolishness to charge the park funds for the water that we use in that recreational area. But that's some of the water that is treated but not billed. The other one is similar, and it's quite a bit more in terms of volume. It's probably close to 1 million gallons a month of water that is used at the sewer plant in the process of treating the waste. And so that is metered. I honestly didn't run out and get a meter reading. I'm not being facetious, but we know it estimates 100,000 gallons on the days that this process is going on, and that happens between 1 and 3 times a week. So if you roughly back into it, there's probably 10 times on average a month that happens. So that's where you would come up with that 1,000,000 gallons that is used, unmetered, so therefore nothing's collected. And the same thing, same logic with that. I'd say with swimming pool is I'm not sure what's gained by charging sewer customers for the water that they use and paying that to the water fund. So that's something, that I guess it's possible we could do that, but I'm not sure what's really gained by that. There are other elements there's slow meters, and there is the ongoing pursuit of leaks. I think there was some explanation last week about the firm that we hired that goes out and looks at, listens for, if you will, leaks, and then gives us locations of places we have leaks. We make a judgment on whether we repair those leaks or they're small enough that they're not going to damage the water pressure, and so not every leak detected gets repaired, but it gives us an agenda of the ones that need the most immediate and most serious attention. So those kinds of projects on the water side, water distribution projects, now will come onto the same agenda, competing for some of those federal dollars that we've talked about, competing with the water plant and the need to make improvements to the water plant. So there'll be a lot of choices on the side of how much of that 1.2 million of city money we can put to those purposes. One more thing on the ARPP. I think gosh, it seems like 5 meetings, maybe that we've had 6 meetings with jurisdictions in the county that have been called by the commissioners. They have $8 million to divvy up. I believe it's 8.4, but it might not be quite that much. And one of the things that one of the points that I've made, one of the arguments that I've made is that Galion needs to be dealt in on the distribution of those funds. So stay tuned. We're going to continue to push for roughly sort of a per capita assignment of those dollars. So it sounds again a little bit perhaps crusading, but I think it's absolutely necessary to go to those meetings and represent Galion's point of view. By and large, we have not a lot of community interest in some of the other projects that seem to be on the top of the county commissioners list. So these ones that we've talked about, the conversion of private sewers to public sewers, the tightening up of some of the water losses, the investment in Railroad Street, all are kinds of things that are going to cost a lot of money. And we really have 2 choices. One is to raise your rates, which has never been, so almost the opposite of the philosophy that we've employed here, is keep rates as low as possible. So we can substitute what might be potential rate increases, use these federal funds and get improvements on a broad base for a lot of people in town, rather than one particular extension or another under the umbrella of community growth and potential job growth. I think we can accomplish that, but we have to take care of our existing customers and our existing infrastructure first. So I'll stop with that. Can't quite see if Matt's got questions or not, but we covered a lot of ground. So that's what we got.
Believe it or not, no questions
Okay.
yet. So if anybody has anything, please submit now.
Dead air, worst thing ever. It's kind of painful for me because I could keep on talking. There's many things to talk about, but yep, continuing to bring in outside funds to keep our transportation, to summarize, to keep our transportation plan moving forward. Thursday, I guess, the sale date on the, again, the big project. And, fingers crossed and all those kinds of superstitious tricks as far as making sure we have good competitive bids and we get that project started later this year. The turn lane on Brant Road, anyone who lives in town knows the need to have that. I was noticing there's some serious potholes out there in that general berm area out there as people try to scoot around. We're gonna try to get out there. I think oftentimes when there's a big project anticipated, the highway authorities will stop doing any maintenance because it's gonna get torn out anyways. And so we can't adopt that approach. We'll get out there and get that straightened up. So port meeting, you got to be there to experience it, and maybe we can talk them into live streaming those or zoom in them so that they can be recorded, so people been struck by how many people are covering council meetings and committee meetings. Now that we've had our community appetite whetted by that. So anyways, you got anything?
Yes, I had
Okay.
a question come in from Ray.
Yeah.
He said, Mayor, as newer permanent residents of Galleon, outside of the Free Center and most recent sewer and water infrastructure, what would you say are the 5 most important for the commerce development of Galleon, as you say, pieces of the future puzzle? Same for the largest challenges.
Oh gosh, sounds like a campaign question, Ray. I think I'm never prepared for those questions. I was thinking if not knowing exactly when you moved to the community, Portland Way from end to end on the west side of town was in almost impassable shape, particularly from about the hospital south. That project, I think, was a major improvement. Some discussion about widening, but I think it's really turned out to be okay. There's a little bit of left-hand turns that go on back in the Sunnyside area. The completion of the widening, I often call it the McDonald's project, that's been in service, Ray, long enough that we're probably going to have to begin to look at the surface on that. In fact, we are crack sealing that area this year to make sure that we don't have a further erosion of pavement. Then there, of course, was the next section of widening, and then this one anticipated. So I think that's probably one of the major improvements. I think the resurfacing from city limits to city limits of Harding Way is a pretty good roadway accomplishment. What you've seen is a stabilizing in the amount of money that we can spend on the residential streets, secondary streets. So we're able to dedicate around $300,000, and while you can never satisfy everyone with the resurfacing program, I think generally there's been a predictability that this certain amount will get done. So I'd say overall, the improvement of the highways. The next set of things are, a little bit like a teacher probably feels like the kids in their class, and those would be just a whole handful of improvements in the parks. One thing we didn't do a good job is logging a lot of before and after. And so once the new press box goes up at the football stadium and it's a couple of years later, I think people forget what it was like before that. That's going to be true here real soon when they get the football field lights completed. No one imagined the splash park. I can remember when we did this, Ray, gosh, it's really in the first year after the city's obligation to pay debt with freeze funds was accomplished, that mortgage was paid off, and we got into these projects. We built a $400,000 splash park. Got to go out there, Ray, if you haven't been there. Over 20,000 guests a year. So that's it. There's the Graders Park. You have to see it to believe it. And of course, I'm real partial to that. Like I said, they're like kids in my classroom. The bike path, and in general, we're looking forward to improvements at Pico. Point on that maybe the second big category of things that are different are really the quality of the parks. And although you get people commenting on social media about how they're not well maintained, I couldn't disagree more. And so I apply my memory to how they were a few years ago, and how they're maintained now, and how much more is required of maintenance when you have these new assets out there that we built and continue to build. So those are two important things. Couple of other ones I think that are worth noting is we're staffing up our police department at the maximum number. There's always in a small department like this turnover, not only with new chiefs, but in the patrolman ranks. But we're getting ready. I think I mentioned last week, we're gonna authorize 3 new patrol people. And so I think that's something that is taken for granted, along generally with the management of the human resource function. How do you like that, Ray? Human resource. Got 100 employees, 4 different union contracts. This is almost, again, if you say something, then all heck will break loose. But I think relatively speaking, compared to other communities in our area around the state, our workers get the job done, work hard, and management does not try to get in their way or tell them how to do things. And so I think when you have productive workers and you have relatively good relations with the unions, there's nothing to fuss about. But that's takes a lot of work among everybody involved to keep that moving forward. So I think that's been an accomplishment. We've negotiated, I think, 3 contracts. I think what people really are looking for is a forward motion in terms of jobs and job opportunities. Of course, you got a lot of people re-entering the workforce. A lot of people are hiring, so it's a little bit unique. But we continue to have our eye on the ball, if you will. That's always been, since 14 and 15, the redevelopment of that southwest quadrant of Brant Road and 598. Pretty soon we're going to stop calling it the old Pico property. It'll have a new name, and then we'll begin to understand it that way. Tramick Sloan, used to be Crawford Machine, is pumping away. They're bringing production to Ohio. They bought the building out there. I think that's real positive. The other 100,000 square foot plus building is occupied for the next several years, and it's a warehousing operation, and so it's gonna expand and contract in terms of activity and in terms of employment. But sometimes you're asked, and I think there's a desire for new industry to come to town. And you have to set the table for that, and it's a slower process than I think many of us would like. But our first obligation on the jobs front, on the employment opportunity stuff, is making sure that existing employers are finding quality workers. So you have to balance between trying to bring in new industry and trying to meet the needs of the existing industry. So I think those are 4 or 5. Since I'm on a roll identifying them, and maybe someone would say, well, there's too many things on that agenda to accomplish. I think the next thing that I would mention that the mayor's office has brought initial energy to and continues to keep promoting is the need to have housing options, new housing. I think all of us in the community hear frequently, if not on a daily basis, the need for new housing, the unavailability of housing, the whisper that it might be up for sale, and descending on the seller are all kinds of people interested in buying. So I'm convinced that there's a real desire, pent-up demand for new housing, and so that's when I mentioned earlier the Port Authority meeting, trying to break a log jam, if you will, and get some housing starts here. I think it's real important. A few years ago, when we started up this mayoral statutory system, the idea of new housing, new industry, new commercial stuff, that was, got an eye roll out of people, and now it's switched over to people having what will happen next. And I think that's really the mode that we're in, trying to set the table on the industrial side. And then I think one of the keys to being able to grow the community is absolutely to grow it, is to have new places, additional places, renovated places for people to live. So I don't know if that's 5 or 6 different things. I think it's Monday night, the mayor over answered the question, but I think all those are important things that have been accomplished. And sometimes maybe the other half of it, what are the challenges? Being able to manage differences in the community, moving forward while not agreeing on everything. I think the best example right now is something, there are days when I wish I had never mentioned and hadn't been among the people who originally thought of filling the need for recreational facilities with freeze funds in what that's now turned into the Freeze Center. Sometimes I wish it's been such a long effort to get it going, and if we aren't careful, one of the things that can happen, one of the things that I think maybe is happening, is the pulling apart of the community, which has been one of the best things that's been accomplished. Not just because the community knew it needed to work together. And now one of the big challenges for the mayor is going to be to keep those different interests, people who don't see the need for a free center, and the people who are all in, as they say, have doubled down on the free center, and their fervent belief that if that's going to be a real game changer, transformative. You'll hear that language used among the most vocal proponents of the center. I think it has great potential for the community. I think what gets me in trouble with those wide-eyed enthusiasts is trying to bridle the enthusiasm, trying to listen to people who say, well, this will never work. You know, what do you mean by work? I think if people are using it, it will be successful. So one of the biggest challenges is to be able to accomplish a major project like this. It's going to probably push 10 million plus, and do it in a way that doesn't divide the community. And so that will be a major challenge. I think also as we come back from COVID, the recovery is going to be uneven, and that you'll see businesses, small and large, that kept it going through the pandemic, who are just out of gas. And so how you start those gaps in your local economy, I think, will be a real important thing. Boring stuff, other challenges will be, we continue to maintain really traditional, old school insurance benefits for our employees. And so that's going to be a challenge. I think when businesses eat up through high deductibles and smaller coverages, I know that's what they can afford, but when that happens, I think that makes it a less favorable place to work. We don't want to reduce those benefits. So I think that'll be a challenge, trying to continue to pay people fairly, maintain benefits in an economy local economy that you have to work every day to keep it plugging along. So, if I only have one question, then I'm going to answer it like it's an invitation for a speech, but I hope that covers it. A lot of priorities. I tend to think the town is on the upswing still, and we probably need a push of momentum to get it moving forward at a faster clip. It's probably last challenge to me is to keep my frustration in check, because things can't move as fast as you'd like them to, and try to be patient as we knit the community together, and don't see city government as a wedge that divides different interests, different neighborhoods in town. So, all right, did I drone on long enough to put everyone to sleep, or do we have some more stuff?
No, a couple more questions
Good.
came in. So this next one came from Becky. Going back to 598, she said, is there some way to put an activation switch on the traffic signal at 598 and Brant Road? The wait for the light is ridiculously long.
Yeah, there is a camera up there, and so there is an activation. The old school was you pull up and there was a loop detector and you complete the loop and trigger the signal. Now there's a little camera, so next time you're out there, you'll see that on all 4 quadrants. I can check. I'm by far inexpert on signal timing, but yeah, I think the wait on Brant Road sometimes is a little bit maddening. I think that having a controlled turn lane where you'll be able to turn left will help lessen that. The one that you see some impatience all the time are people coming up the north end, either Fairview or Market, shooting over on Brant Road to get 598 to get 30. That seems like if you're stuck there and you can't swing around to the right and get onto 598, I agree with her. The signal seems, especially when you're in a hurry, but there are cameras. It would be a matter of changing the timing, of which I really don't know how many seconds here or there, but as always, we'll check into that.
Okay, thanks, Mayor.
Yeah.
Next question tonight came from David. He asked, what's going on with the dilapidated building? And that is in reference of the building the city recently took.
Oh, you're
ownership
talking
of.
about a Harding-Way?
Correct.
Yeah, that's been a long process. I guess that goes back to frustration with the process not moving as fast. I believe it's Friday, bid openings for that. The money's in place. We've got money from the county land bank to help defray some of the costs. And then the city allocated money in the 2021 budget to help get some of these demos, these larger commercial eyesores, off of Harding-Way in this case. So, yep, this Friday, and so it sounds like an end of the summer, early completion date. The final look of it is it's probably going to be seeded, but it will so it doesn't just look like an empty former parking lot. But our hope is that that can be reconverted and reused pretty soon, and it doesn't just sit as a couple acres that need mowed by the city come next year. So that's what's going on with that one. Some cleanup on South Market down there, just really cosmetic stuff in the old Eagle Crusher property. The environmental review of that is moving slower than I'd like, but we're going to get that reviewed and then proceed slowly to clear up that property. In talking late last week with the county, there is a lot of money in the state budget that is assigned for demolition and redevelopment. There's another new commitment to Brownfield, so we're waiting, I think, 90 days for the state Department of Development to come up with the rules for this demo money, come up with the rules for the Brownfield redevelopment, and so we hope to be in the ring again, competing with the big boys and big girls, the larger communities, and using those type of funds on specific projects. Last thing I'd say about demo is that because there's money available, our focus has we've refocused on the need to get the old Elliott Machine building torn down. That is, my guess is beyond useful reuse, and what it needs to be is demolished, cleared, and that will improve the neighborhood nature, neighborhood feel of the old Wrenchville property and help that residential growth get going sooner than later. So, anyways, that's demo, the one, and then there's state money, and then we already have targets that we know we need to be ready to pounce on, is what I started to say. I guess I did say pounce on those dollars, try to make sure that they end up in this part of the state. All right. What did you got?
Okay. Thanks, Mayor. Next question came from Deborah. She asked, are there any plans for the property located between KFC and Save-A-Lot?
Yes. And the real estate part of it, as I understand it, hinges on getting a commitment from Save-A-Lot to make renovations to the property. The entity that's wanting to acquire that then would do development, but they need a commitment to the existing major tenant that they'll re-up, if you will, and then I think that will close that, or bring that together, not close it, but get the real estate deal closed, and then the developer, we've talked generally about some things that could go there. And so, yeah, there's a project in the works, but everyone who's lived here has seen that before and seen what happens when you have truly absentee leasehold. The owners are local, but the leasehold people have been out of town, out of state, out of mind in terms of the taking care of that property. So, did she say eyesore when that question was asked?
No, just the property.
I thought I heard eyesore. I thought eyesore. It does look bad coming into town. Because otherwise, that section right there is when the widening happens and we get ownership there that wants to invest. I think you'll see that that area that once was pretty active bounce back. I'll stay on here all night to talk about something other than the demolition because there's a lot of good stuff going on, but there certainly is a need to take care of those identified rundown spots, try to get them cleared up, but particularly when clearing up the building will you'll certainly see development spring forward. So, all right, what else you got?
That is all I have as of right now.
Okay, well, I think to summarize, the emphasis with the federal dollars, the recovery plan dollars is going to be on sewer and water improvements at the plant. That serves everyone, but then the improvements we're going to look at are going to start as close to residences, as close to problem areas as possible, and build out from there versus a philosophy that said, well, let's extend the water line into Richland County, let's extend the water line most of the way to Crestline. Those kinds of speculative, if you will, investments, I think, produce fewer results for fewer people than the approach that I'm very interested in seeing council take. And so with a reduced amount of money, it's going to be more important than ever to get Galleon's allocation, our per capita share of those $8 million that were sent to the courthouse. So wish me luck. That'll be an ongoing effort to try to identify projects and get those into the mix in water and sewer improvement. So if that's all, no questions about water and water loss?
No.
All right, there were some friends of mine that were commenting on Facebook, and they were talking about the Great Water Conspiracy of 2021. So, all right, I'm going to go back to that, writing that novel, and then seriously, we are trying to track down that, answer some of the questions, and I particularly want to shout out to John Shade, who I don't know, but I agree with most of the time. I think all of the time. And Harry Titus, that I've known for a long time, real heroic guy, who's sort of voice of reason in some of these discussions that have spun up over sewer and water. So thanks, you guys, for speaking up. It's appreciated. It's difficult for me to get on there and start arguing with people. So when you make the argument I would make, it's greatly appreciated. And I think reasonable people in town appreciate that as well. So. All right, I'll duck and run on that, Matt. See everybody next week.